He held the proposal like it might stain his fingers. Then in front of 12 executives and a table worth more than my entire apartment, he ripped it in half. $2.8 million. 6 months of research. 3 strategic partners. Government backing. Gone in one arrogant gesture. This, he said, voice smooth and venomous, is pathetic work. Everyone stared at me waiting for a meltdown. An excuse? A breakdown. But I didn't flinch. I just smiled. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I knew something he didn't. What he'd just torn up wasn't a proposal. It was a fuse. And by the time he realized what it was connected to, it was already burning. This is pathetic work. He said it like it was a fact, not an opinion. Like gravity or death. Charles Redford didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just held my $2.8 million proposal between 2 fingers, like it smelled bad, then very deliberately ripped it in half. I didn't blink. We were in the executive conference room on the 41st floor of Helion Core's Glass and Steel headquarters. 12 people sat around the table, men in tailored suits. 1 woman from legal. And me, Morgan Hale, 35 years old VP of Strategic Growth, watching 6 months of my work flutter to the floor like confetti. Is this what you think Helion Core invests in now? He continued. Public education solar panels for cafeteria rooftops. It's not just naive, it's insulting. No one spoke. No one needed to. His word was gospel here. Charles Redford had built this company from a garage in Duluth into a billion-dollar energy firm with federal contracts and a lobbyist on speed dial. He was the kind of CEO who got his face carved into business magazines and made keynote speeches where people paid just to breathe the same air. He was also the kind of man who enjoyed breaking people in public. Like now. I could feel my ears burning, but my voice was steady. You're absolutely right, sir. He blinked. Once, twice. I didn't give him time to recover. I gathered the torn pieces of my proposal, stacked them neatly, and placed them in my folder. You're right. This isn't your kind of league. Someone at the end of the table shifted in their seat. I pushed back my chair and stood. Every movement deliberate, silent, clean. Thank you for your time. That's when the murmuring started, confused low, like an itch behind the walls. Not because I'd stood up to Charles. No, they'd seen that before. And those people usually ended up gone within the month. What caught them off guard was that I wasn't begging. I wasn't crying. I wasn't raging. I was smiling. And not the polite frozen smile women wear when men try to embarrass them in meetings. No. It was the kind of smile you give when you've already made a phone call, or written a name on a list, or moved your queen into position 6 turns ago, and only now flipped the board to reveal checkmate. Because what Charles didn't know, and what no one in that room could possibly imagine, was that I hadn't walked into that meeting to get approval. I'd walked in to offer him one last chance. He tore it up. And now I'd make sure he understood exactly what he'd just thrown away. By the time I took out my phone in the elevator, the first message had already gone out. Phase 1 had begun. I didn't go back to my office. I went straight to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and exhaled for the first time in 15 minutes. Behind me, the top floor of Helion Core was still frozen in that sterile hush, the kind that follows public humiliation but precedes whispers. Let them whisper. As the elevator descended, I pulled out my phone and opened the contact marked C. I hadn't texted her in weeks. Not because we weren't in sync, but because everything we did had to be timed. Precise. Sent, it's done. He shredded it. Green light. The reply came before I hit the ground floor. Green light. Welcome to Phase 1, Hale. Her name was Claire Redford. Yes, that Redford. Charles's daughter. She wasn't my friend. Not really. She was the product of a man who taught her power was control. Silence was strength and affection was a thing you leveraged. But she'd come to me 6 months ago after a board meeting I wasn't even in. I want to see him lose, she'd said, but it has to look like he did it to himself. That's what we'd been building, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. I walked out of Helion Core's building into a sharp Minneapolis wind that whipped my coat open. I didn't feel the cold. My body was too wired. I wasn't just angry, I was clear. Redford thought the $2.8 million deal was the end of it. But it wasn't the real deal. That proposal was a decoy. The actual contract, updated, signed, and sealed, was already in motion with an external foundation that bypassed corporate channels entirely. Claire had helped me set it up weeks ago. Quiet funding, shadow stakeholders, private escrow. It wasn't fraud. It was a contingency. Because I knew Charles Redford would never approve a project that didn't center him. He didn't see the merit. He only saw the mirror. And the project I'd proposed, it wasn't about revenue. It was about reach. Solar integration in public school systems. A pilot program with measurable social impact and federal momentum. It was bold, yes, but also bulletproof. He called it pathetic because it didn't glorify him. Fine. Now it would bury him. That night I opened the encrypted file Claire had sent weeks ago. It wasn't dramatic, no secret recordings or scandalous texts. Just one quiet document, a confidential report from an internal audit Charles had buried. One that, if released, would raise questions about inflated assets, misclassified contracts, and valuation manipulation ahead of their upcoming investor summit. I didn't plan to leak it yet. First, I needed to light a different fuse. I called the one person Charles thought had vanished for good. She picked up on the second ring and said, "Morgan Hale. I wondered when you'd come for him." Her voice hadn't changed. Calm, low, precise, like someone who weighed every syllable before releasing it into the world. "Raya Talwar," I said. "I need you." A pause. Not dramatic. Measured. "Then let's talk about the future." She didn't mean metaphorically. Rhea designed futures. She was an energy systems engineer, formerly Helion Core's top research mind, until Charles Redford tried to buy out her patent for 1/10 of its worth, and blacklisted her when she refused. That was 3 years ago. Since then, she'd gone quiet. Not vanished, just invisible. By choice. We met the next morning at a co-op cafe in St. Paul, a place so low-tech the menu was still written in chalk, and nobody asked what you did for a living. Raya arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans, a canvas jacket, and a look that said she already knew too much. "I heard about your deal," she said, sipping mint tea. "And how he tore it up." Of course she had. Rhea still had friends in the shadows, people who whispered before they vanished from the Helion Core payroll. "He called it pathetic," I said. Her eyes didn't flicker. "That's his word for anything he doesn't control." I nodded, then opened the folder. Inside was the real contract, the one with Raya's tech embedded, her name protected, and a clause guaranteeing her full research freedom for 5 years. It was backed by the private foundation Claire and I had assembled, with third-party legal oversight, to ensure Charles never touched a thing. "I don't just want to implement your model in the education sector," I said. "I want to build the first city-scale test of urban energy redistribution, starting with schools, and with neighborhoods. And Redford, I don't need his permission, just his silence." Rhea leaned back. For a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Reluctant hope, maybe? Or disbelief that someone still cared enough to ask. "He buried my career," she said quietly. "Told people I was emotionally unstable, that I fabricated numbers to get investor attention." I didn't flinch. "He does that, makes people disappear." Quietly. Rhea studied me for a long moment. Then she slid the folder back across the table. "I'll help you, but I'm not doing it for vengeance." "Neither am I said. That wasn't a lie. This wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about restoring value to something that had been made to feel disposable. Like people, like ideas, like women. As we shook hands, Rhea asked, "So what now?" I smiled. "Now we gather the rest of the storm." Storms don't announce themselves. They build. Quietly, in the corners. And mine started with a list of 4 names. Each one had something Charles Redford wanted buried. Each one had a reason to help me dig it up. 1. Jace Coleman, former VP of Finance. Sharp jaw, sharper numbers. Disappeared 18 months ago after voluntarily resigning mid-quarter, right before Helion Core's valuation mysteriously jumped 12%. I met him in the corner booth of a silent jazz bar 2 blocks from the Mississippi River. He didn't shake my hand. "You know he's got ears everywhere, right?" Jace said. Eyes never leaving the bourbon glass. Last time I tried to warn someone, my non-compete was extended retroactively. You ever heard of that? I'm not here to ask you to testify, I said. I'm asking you to help me prevent another inflated lie before he sells fiction to real investors. He stared at me, then reached into his coat and pulled out a thumb drive. I never deleted the audit trail. I couldn't. It was too clean. 2. Vivian Reese, journalist. Fired 3 years ago when her expose on Helion Core's Shell LLCs was killed at the last second. She now ran an independent blog about corporate ethics. Not viral, but real. When I emailed her, I didn't expect a response. She replied in 2 minutes. We met in a co-working space with more plants than people. Vivian had the coiled intensity of someone used to being shut down, but when I told her I had recordings, financial documents, and one very cooperative insider, her expression changed. This isn't a story, she said. It's a reckoning. 3. Devin Hart, quiet. Brilliant. Fired for lack of creative output after Redford implemented a code protocol Devin had designed. When I found him, he was working freelance IT for a vegan bakery chain. I showed him a schematic of the secure comms system. We'd need to keep everything untraceable. He looked at it for 5 seconds and said, I can do better. He did. 4. Claire Redford, the daughter, the wild card. If anyone had the keys to the vault, it was her. But she also had the most to lose. In public, she was still the face of Redford's philanthropic arm, smiling on brochures, chairing committees. But behind closed doors, she knew who he really was. And she was done playing legacy princess. I want you to destroy the company, Claire said one night over encrypted call. Not ruin the employees, not burn it to the ground, just remove him. We're not going to use illegal methods, I reminded her. She laughed low and bitter. With Charles. The truth is illegal, at least in his world. By week's end, the framework was ready. Jace had verified financial discrepancies tied to false sustainability claims. Redford's supposed green initiative that on paper looked like innovation, but in reality was a tax scheme. Devin had finished the encrypted platform. Vivian had begun stitching the timeline. Rhea had run 3 modeling simulations of the urban solar grid using real-world data. And Claire had given us something more dangerous than data. Access. To Charles's personal schedule, to the board meeting calendar, to his direct investor contact list. We didn't have a weapon. We had a map. And in 6 days at the Q3 investor briefing, we'd use it to bring him down on his own stage, with his own audience and his own damn mic. There's a specific silence that lives in high-rise offices just before an investor call. Not calm. Not peaceful. It's the kind of silence that knows it's being watched. The Q3 briefing was scheduled for Thursday morning, but the real meeting, the one that mattered, was set for Wednesday night, off the record. A closed strategic session between Charles Redford and one potential partner from Singapore's sovereign wealth fund. And I was going to be in that room. Not as Morgan Hale, as project liaison. Claire made sure of it. We didn't use a wire, too risky. Devin designed a wearable recording system that sat inside the spine of a sleek black fountain pen. Perfectly functional, completely undetectable. The mic activated on voice pattern. The encryption was military grade. And the battery would hold for 6 hours. Don't talk too much, Devin had warned me. Let him hang himself. Redford was in fine form that night. Armani suit, whiskey untouched, hair sharper than ever. When the investor excused himself for a call, Charles turned to me and smiled like we were on the same team. Appreciate you setting this up, Hale, he said. I'll be honest, I didn't expect much from you after your little meltdown in the boardroom. I kept my face still. We all have bad days. He chuckled. Don't worry, I've already repackaged the education solar proposal. Same bones. I just cleaned up the nonsense about community-driven ownership. Nobody wants kids owning energy infrastructure. It'll go through in Q4 under my name. I said nothing. He leaned in. Look, Morgan, you're talented, but you gotta understand how this world works. Vision doesn't matter. People don't invest in ethics. They invest in control. And I'm the safest pair of hands they know. There it was. The line we needed. But he wasn't done. You know the thing about engineers, idealists like Rhea Talwar? They think if you just build something good enough, the world will reward you. It won't. You either own the system or it chews you up. And I've spent 2 decades making sure I own every gear. He took a sip of whiskey, then grinned. And if that means pushing out a few sensitive types along the way, so be it. We build clean energy, not a daycare. I left 10 minutes later blaming a migraine. In the elevator, I didn't breathe until the doors closed. The pen sat in my coat pocket, still warm. By the time I reached the lobby, the file was already uploading, split into 2 encrypted mirrors. One to Devon's server, one to a secure cloud link that would auto-distribute if we didn't disable it in 24 hours. Insurance, just in case. At 9:00 a.m., the next day, Redford would take the stage at the Investor Summit. And for once, he'd be the only one in the room without a clue what was coming. By 8:57 a.m., the ballroom at the Orville Investors Club was packed. Black suits, silver hair, diamond watches. People who thought climate justice was a campaign, not an operating model. And at the center of it all, standing like a king at the pulpit, Charles Redford. I know you're all here, he boomed, because you believe in vision, in scale, and in Helion Core's future. Applause. Camera shutters. He launched into his usual cadence, clean energy, ROI, market dominance pipeline projections. Nobody noticed the screens behind him flicker for half a second. Nobody but me. I was standing backstage next to Devon, who tapped a single key on his tablet. Upload live, I whispered. He nodded. Redford was halfway through a sentence about ethical acceleration when the first slide behind him changed. It wasn't part of his deck. Slide 1, a ledger. Date stamped. Showing the same 8.2 murders invoice coded under 3 different departments. Gasps rippled across the room. Redford paused. Looks like, someone's having fun with the presentation. He laughed tight. Slide 2. An audio waveform. The caption underneath read, Redford. Vision doesn't matter. People invest in control. And I'm the safest pair of hands they know. His voice, played aloud, crystal clear. People turned. Some stood. Board members pulled out phones. Redford dropped the clicker. This is doctored, he barked. It's fake. It's slide 3. A transcript of the call from 2 nights ago. The one where he said, we build clean energy, not a daycare. That line alone would end 5 key education contracts. Someone whispered, he's finished. I stepped onto the stage. He saw me, and for the first time, he flinched. Morgan, he growled. You did this? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You said no one invests in ethics, I said. Turns out they do, and it's their money you're playing God with. You broke protocol, he snapped. You've just tanked the company's credibility. I smiled. Calm, centered. You tore up the deal that would have saved your IPO. Then stole it, rewrote it, and tried to sell it as yours. You lied. To investors, to regulators, to the board. He stepped toward me. I've survived worse. Not this time. I turned to the audience. This presentation and all supporting documents have already been submitted to the SEC, the DOJ, and every institutional stakeholder with equity over 2%. The board has 24 hours to respond before formal charges are filed. A beat of stunned silence. Then one man stood up. Then another. 2 board members walked out, phones to their ears. A third tore off his name badge. Redford looked small. Not defeated. Not yet, but deflated. You're just another angry woman, he spat. This is personal. I stepped closer. Just enough for him to hear. No, this is structural. He thought he was the system, but the system just walked out on him. They didn't arrest him that day. They rarely do. Instead, Charles Redford was quietly escorted from the building by 2 board security officers. No cuffs, no press photos, just silence. Heavy, humiliating silence. The kind that follows a dethroning. By noon, Helion Core's press team released a generic statement. Mr. Redford will be stepping down effective immediately to spend time with family. By 3:00 p.m., shares had dropped 18%. By nightfall, 3 federal subpoenas had been issued. Quiet, precise, deadly. I didn't watch the news. I went home. My apartment was still the same. Minimal, neat. A basil plant leaning too far toward the window. A tea mug with "Prove Them Wrong" etched on the side, half ironic when I'd bought it. I sat at my kitchen counter and opened the letter. No return address. But the penmanship was familiar, slanted, expensive. I underestimated you, that's all it said. No name, no apology. Just 7 syllables that read like surrender. I folded it. Put it away. Some people don't deserve a reply. 3 weeks later, I met Raya, Devin, and Claire at the pilot site, a public middle school on the east side. The first of 9 that had just approved integration of Ria's adaptive solar model. The first test city in the country. The students had painted the panels. Bright yellows, bold oranges, names signed underneath: Anna 27, Jordan S. Zion future engineer. A science teacher hugged Ria. They've never cared about infrastructure before, she laughed teary-eyed. Now they're fighting over who gets to explain kilowatts at career day. Ria turned to me half grinning. You realize you could run any energy firm in the country right now, right? I did. I'd turned down 4 job offers, high 6 figures, corner offices, public praise. I chose something else. We called it Glassline, not a company, a collective. Dedicated to getting underfunded, undervalued innovations into real public systems, without forcing creators to sell out their vision. No equity traps, no extraction. Just proof that integrity and growth could live in the same sentence. And we weren't alone anymore. Vivian's story had gone viral. Not in the scandal way, but in the damn, maybe we can do this way. Dozens of whistleblowers reached out. Former engineers, ex-lawyers, interns who never thought their stories mattered. Now they had a network. And Charles. He lives in Scottsdale now. Consulting probably. Writing a memoir. Reinventing himself with a new haircut and a sanitized past. But the industry changed. Because we didn't just beat him, we removed him from the equation. Sometimes I still replay that moment in the boardroom. When he called my $2.8 million deal pathetic. When he looked me in the face and thought I'd break. What he didn't know was I'd already secured the future. Not just mine, ours. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. This wasn't just about corporate revenge. It was about reminding people that silence isn't safety. That being underestimated isn't the end, it's the beginning. If this hit something in you, if you've ever been shut down, pushed out, or told you're not ready, hit the like button. Leave a comment. And if you're ready to hear more stories like this one, you know what to do. Subscribe. Let's keep building the kind of justice they never see coming.